Hey everyone, and welcome to my channel, Firefly Tarot. This is not a pick a card reading. This is an informational video that has been requested of me for some time now, and I have attempted to record a few times, didn't work out. So here I am again, and the title of this video is My Tarot Process: How to Read Tarot Cards, Tips from an Intuitive Tarot Reader. So this is not going to be in a fashion like I originally wanted, which was in lessons. I'm just going to run through my tarot process, and my goal is to share some of my specific tips that I personally use, or maybe here and there I've gotten some knowledge from books or other resources, which I will link in the description. Any of my information is also in the description, as well as the decks that I'm going to be talking about today. So this is more speaking of first the process that I personally use, and then I'm going to go into some other specific tips for you guys so that you can enhance your tarot card experience and your skills as well. Whether you're just beginning or you've done it for a while, and a couple of expert tips, or well, advanced tips I should say, later on in the process. So I'm going to also separate some of the content and label them in the timestamps, so do feel free to skip around. If there's any section that does not interest you at all, you know, obviously you can just skip past that, but that is my goal, to just share my personal tips, so to share it with you guys in the collective. And I'm going to do it in a very just sort of natural, go with the flow kind of pace here, because I tried it the other way and it didn't work. Okay, so here we go. The reason why I'm showing you these cards first is because this is actually the deck that I learned from originally, and I will get into that later on. This is the Gilded Tarot, and I will speak of this later. If you are just starting out, I do not really recommend using a deck that differs too much from the traditional, which is the Rider-Waite. So again, more on that later, but this is the card deck that I did originally learn from about, it might have been, oh boy, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, where I just sat there with a book on a plane and just learned the meanings. I didn't know what I was doing back then. So the next section I'm going to briefly speak on, people have asked me about this. Again, you can skip forward. This is about how my very first experience with tarot. Okay, so it was not with this. I was about 10 years old, and a family friend was visiting, and I was sitting across from her. I'm just going to keep this there. And I was sitting across from her, and we were playing around with a deck of cards, a regular pack of playing cards. And I was just being a kid. I didn't know what was going on. I think that something within me called me to read her fortune, or maybe she asked me to do it. But I started playing around with the regular playing cards, and I just started shuffling them in a cool way. And she was, you know, kind of getting into it. And I was hanging out, and I'm a 10-year-old child, and this is an adult that I'm across from, so that part kind of matters slightly. So I just started looking at the symbols and the colors and just whatever I was feeling from the cards. I didn't know anything about tarot cards. I didn't know anything about psychic abilities, nothing back then. But I just started blurting stuff out. I just started blurting out things that I could feel or I could see from the cards. And it turns out that everything I told her was right. And I just thought it was funny, because she's an adult woman getting super giddy at my my predictions or my interpretations. And that it was a funny experience, you know. So I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't do this on purpose. It just was something that came to me naturally. So a long time passes, it was like a good 10 years, and I only learned how to read tarot deliberately through a book, through actual study, much later in life. And I had a very, very brief experience with it. I used these cards. I'll link the book that I used first and a couple of the other resources that I used back then. I learned I learned the card meanings, and I learned one particular spread. It was the Celtic cross spread, which I no longer even use. And I performed some readings on a couple of friends and family members, and I'm not sure exactly how well I did, but I think that for the most part, people were happy with my readings. Then I took a huge break, a huge hiatus from tarot reading. And what I find kind of funny is when I returned to tarot cards, it was when I started this YouTube channel. So again, it was like a whole 10-year thing. So I started this YouTube channel January of 2020. So almost exactly a year from when I'm posting this video. And so the reason I'm telling you that is because I don't collectively have a lot of experience in terms of years with the tarot cards themselves. However, my experience comes more from my actual ability to use my intuition, my psychic sight, my third eye, my empathy skills, my other skills that I will be talking about in this video that have contributed to the accuracy of my readings. Well, apparently the accuracy, because when I'm doing a tarot reading, I have no idea if it's going to be accurate or not, no clue. And when I started the tarot channel, that was one of my biggest concerns. And I'm thinking, there's no way that I can know if this is going to ring true for people. But of course, the comments is what told me that when I first started the channel. I'm like, oh, okay. I was pleasantly surprised. And after a lot of practice, I just kept getting more into it and more into it. And here I am. So that's a tiny bit of my story. I only learned about spirit guides within the past couple of years, but that knowledge completely transformed my readings. That's thanks to some spiritual friends that I had made a couple years back, and they taught me about spirit guides. And when I understood that that's how tarot cards worked, that changed everything. So again, we can get into that a little bit later. So enough about me. Let me put these back, and I will get into the first part of the informational video. All right, so these are the cards that I use most frequently. This is the Universal Rider-Waite. It looks pretty much like the traditional Rider-Waite, not much difference in terms of the imagery. So again, I'm going to go into a little bit more of the lessons and the tips, in terms of the structured tips for beginners a little later. This is my tarot process now, so that's what I'm going to get into in this next section. So before so I'm going to put this back because this is more realistic, right? So when I sit down to do a reading, my tarot table, my sacred space, is already clear. And I do have my, you can have however many tarot cards that you'd like, obviously, but I have them over here just all neatly organized. And for the most part, they all do have that crystal on top of it. I do like to use clear crystal quartz because it does cleanse the energy. And as a practical kind of thing, it does sort of act as a paperweight so that the cards kind of stay in place. So I would show you the camera shot, but my camera's kind of tacked down right now. So that's already there. Now, another thing that I do that's important for me in my tarot process is I come prepared to the table. I pretty much act like I'm meeting a friend because I'm going to be sitting down and speaking with spirit and working delicately with energies, right? So I pretty much get ready like I would a normal kind of a thing, an appointment type of a thing. So I shower and get dressed, and I wear the same black, like sort of just the same color or just whatever, this is for the purpose of consistency and not getting distracted, but pretty much arriving to the scene with respect. And with intention. So I'm prepared, my table and my space is prepared, and I sit down at the table and I really try to correct my posture and my breathing to get into the flow of things. So one thing that I always have at the table, aside from, you definitely want to have a glass of water, obviously just for practical purposes, but it's sort of an energetic thing as well. 100% of the time when I'm doing a tarot reading, I do have a white candle that is lit. I used to use the small ones, but I switched over to the big one here because it's specifically a candle for cleansing. It's a Reiki charged candle, which I really like. It's a very good addition to my practice is the fact that it's a cleansing candle. When I do my personal readings, I used to use more crystals, but now I just have this little clear crystal quartz sphere in the corner of the video when I do a personal reading. And again, the space is clear, everything is neat and tidy, and I come to my table with an intention of respect and with an open mind, an open heart, an open attitude. Everything is all there even before I start shuffling cards, okay? So that's part of my process, is the preparation. All right, what else? So I finally take the crystal off the cards. I take my cards, my favorite ones here, and I'll speak on that a little bit later in terms of how to choose a tarot deck that is right for you. And what I'll often do is I will just get my energy on the cards, and so I'll just shuffle a couple of times. I've heard that this helps to clear the energy of the cards too, which I do agree with. Okay, so that's just me getting my energy on the cards and just kind of getting grounded to the experience. And speaking of grounding, that is something that I didn't do when I first started the channel, and I wish I did do. Okay, so what you want to do before you start tapping into any energies is you want to prepare yourself and your energy body, right? So again, I mentioned before sitting up tall, okay, and breathing and getting into the flow, feet flat on the floor, usually, and you can do a visualization or an affirmation for just grounding yourself. So a good one to ground yourself is to visualize the roots of the trees shooting down from the bottom of your feet or the base of your spine, basically a root chakra, quick visualization. Another thing that I like to do personally is I rub my hands together and I open up my third eye by just kind of opening it up with my hand like this. I envision a swirling vortex of light in my third eye, blasting through any of the fog just by visualizations and by using the hand to channel. And I also do that for my crown chakra as well, the top of the head. I read in a book once that you can connect through to the cards by using light, a beaming source of light connecting to the divine. You can do anything that you want, but this is just what I personally do. Like I said, this is my personal tarot process. Okay, so I'll do that. And sometimes I do kind of speak to spirit directly, and I'll say a few words of affirmation or of respect or prayer or whatever, stuff like that. Okay, so now that I have my energies pretty much on the cards and I have cleared the cards, another thing, depending, I usually do this, but it does kind of depend. Another thing that I will do is I will cleanse the space with Palo Santo. I don't typically use sage just because for practical purposes, the Palo Santo is just a little bit easier for me. But I do kind of, it is a good habit to cleanse your space regularly, open up the windows and just cleanse your space just in general. Not just your table, but your whole entire home and whatever you're able to, and yourself as well. I typically do that over my third eye as well. I'm emphasizing the third eye chakra simply because that is where I see most of the information, the third eye or the crown. I'm sure that other stuff is involved for other readers though. Okay, so let's say that I am going to be doing a reading, and since I can't fake it no matter how hard I try, I'm going to be pulling some cards for you guys, the collective, okay? So I'm sitting down to do either a pick a card or a personal reading, and I do have my laptop here off screen, and it just shows what I'm looking for. So if I do have a pick a card, I'll have the title there in front of me on a Word document. If I have a personal reading, I have my Calendly platform thing with all the questions there, and I'll look through it before I start recording. I'll read through it and sort of tap into the energy of the person. So that part's there. Okay, so right now, let me just take a second to tap into the energy of the collective, right? So let's say that I'm going to be pulling some cards for you guys. So typically, I use an affirmation, and you guys hear me say it all the time on my videos. I will say, and I'll just do it now, Spirit, this reading is for the collective and the energies and what's going on in their lives right now. Please provide us with clear, guided messages for the collective at this time, please and thank you. and I'll shuffle twice for the most part. And I do make a habit of saying please and thank you quite a bit because, again, respect and reverence for spirit, for the guides, for everything, for everyone and everything. All right, so I think I will probably have to talk about shuffling in this video maybe twice for, you know, depending on who skips around. So you guys saw the way that I shuffled there. It was just like regular playing cards. And the way that I shuffle here, I hold it in my right hand. And with my left hand, I just kind of take one card at a time and catch it. I'm just like thumbing it down. That's pretty much it. I know it looks complicated, and it did take me a lot of practice. The reason why I shuffle like this is because I don't trust myself to shuffle any other way. When I shuffle like that, it gives spirit the opportunity to pull the card out from me. And again, I didn't know back then that spirit or guides or anyone was responsible for this. I had no idea. But once I learned that, it made things 100 times easier, because then it's not up to me and I don't second guess myself. I'm trusting spirit to do it. Okay? So that's what I'll do. So the very first thing that I do in a personal reading is I will get what I have now referred to as a present baseline. So I have found this to be so helpful because I don't use spreads, and it's just not my thing. So part of the tarot process is doing whatever feels natural and comfortable and 100% authentic to you. In fact, when I started the tarot channel, I was like thinking to myself, how are they doing it? What kind of spread are they using? Like what is the process here? But then I just started to do whatever. I just did whatever I felt like I wanted to do. You know, it was the most comfortable thing for me, and I just started pulling cards and interpreting them like a story. That's it. So, but again, for personal readings, I'll start off with just a present baseline of however many cards I feel called to pull at that moment for the person. Right? So Spirit, can you please provide us with so I'll say, what are the present energies for blank, whoever the person's name is. Spirit, can you please provide for us, what are the present energies for the collective right now at this time? Please and thank you. Oh, so I'm just pulling a couple of cards, however many I feel called to pull. And again, I'll go over shuffling later in a different section. Spirit, what are the energies for the collective at this time? Please and thank you. All right, so here we have 4 cards. So I went through the whole deck, and then, you know, sometimes I will pause after I thumb through the entire deck. So we have 4 cards here. One more thing that I do not do out of personal preference, I do not read reversal cards or reversed cards. This is my choice because I feel that if a card needs to find me, it will show itself in the upright position versus showing up, you know, if it's upside down, if it's reversed, then I feel that another card would pop up to show me, like, if it needed to show itself. So other readers, they will take cards that are in the reversal, or in the reversed position rather, because it means the opposite of whatever it is upright. So again, because I feel that inevitably a card will show up if it has to show up, that's the only reason why. And it's just easier for me, you know. I just feel like it's a stronger reading for me personally, because I'm more comfortable with. That's why. So here we are. We do start off with 4 cards. This is an example of a present baseline. So I will look at the first card, or the card that I'm called to place in the position first if I don't know which card came out first. So here we have the Queen of Pentacles. So usually this is talking about the person's energy directly, you know, depending on what it is. It happens to be an image of an actual person versus something, you know, something of more an idea or an event. So, you know, it kind of looks like to me, so if I'm reading this for you guys right now, the way I'm interpreting this is I am looking at one particular card, but I'm looking at the combination of all of the cards, which I can do a separate video on, which takes a lot of practice to do. So here we have the Queen of Pentacles, which is an energy of you guys, the collective, or the person I'm reading for. And the Pentacle suit is for a particular thing, right? So again, that's a totally different topic. But so here the Queen of Pentacles is, and I will kind of gaze at the card and see if anything starts to call out to me. You will find that even though you know the meaning of the cards, depending on the person that you're reading for, different things will pop up to you in the card depending on what they're asking or who this person is. So another thing that is important as you're pulling cards is basically paying attention to the energy of the shuffle. So when I'm doing pick a card readings, sometimes I will shuffle very sluggishly and I feel extremely tired as I'm shuffling. That tells me the energy of the person. Then sometimes I will rapidly shuffle manically and I'm like, okay, this is a lot of excitement here. Everything counts in a tarot reading. In addition to that, the energy of the shuffle, I find that there's also an energy of the alignment of the cards. So often in pick a card readings, sometimes the energy might go in diagonal lines, or they'll be really close together, they'll be far apart. That again matters. Reading tarot cards is all about symbolism. When you first look at the cards and you're learning about the meanings, that's exactly what they will point you towards first, is the symbolism within the cards. So for example, a really good example that I can think of that I often allude to the most is probably the Fool card. So the Fool card has many symbols on it. For example, the white rose that he's holding is a symbol of innocence and purity. The dog, same color, but also a symbol of loyalty. The knapsack, a symbol of basically being a minimalist and not taking baggage with you on the journey. The sun is usually the symbol of happiness, brightness. Again, we see innocence and purity in this card. Anyway, again, separate video which I can get into. So symbolism is everywhere. Okay, so I'm interpreting this. I might see, okay, so the Queen of Pentacles might be a nice, fine card here, but if it's closely connected to a card of pain, obviously there's something wrong here, right? So I will begin to interpret that. I might say something like, you might be trying to focus on your own sense of health and balance, or your own sense of self-care, and trying to focus on maybe even creating something, but there is this pain involved. There is this pain here, okay? So this might represent a present energy, and then as we move forward, I might interpret that this is energy that we're moving into. Again, it's all based off of the gut feeling. So here, what's nice is we move into some clarity, because the Ace of Swords represents clarity and a clear mental state, right? And then over here, we're moving into the Seven of Cups, which represents a lot of opportunity. This sometimes this represents opportunity, and sometimes I see it as distraction. Again, just depends on the energy of the reading. All right, so this is what I might interpret first. Okay, so depending on the situation, you can look at I do sometimes look at the bottom energy. I don't always do this. It just depends. Like if I start to see the same card keep popping up, I will use that as an example. Okay, so I get the present energy. Spirit, anything else for present energies for the collective? Yeah, so the Knight of Swords, I might say, okay, well, there's movement happening. There's movement forward. There's determination. Again, this just depends on how I feel at that moment. Anything else? Yeah, so I might say, still battling with some uncertainty, with some fear, with some illusion, and just working your way out of the moon energy. One of the things that you guys will see me do, whether it's pick a card or in the personal readings, I don't tend to interpret negative things and bad things for the sake of just telling you bad news. What I will do is I will tell you what the seemingly bad news might be, but then because it's my personal preference, I will then ask Spirit, okay, well, what is the guidance? How do we get out of that negative energy? What are the best ways to lift out of that? And then I show a potential outcome, okay? So in other words, I'm very positive focused. That's something I'm very serious about, and I do all the time. I'm sure that all other readers do that as well, but that's just something that I just never leave a reading off in a negative sense. That's just something that I can't bring myself to do, because I don't feel that we're meant to stay stuck in a bad energy. I feel like it's there to show us a way out of that energy. Okay, so so I get a present baseline just to get a feel for the person's energy, just to get a feel of what's going on. Okay, and then for the most part, my readers, my viewers, my clients, or whatever whatever word I could use there, the people who reach out to me, they have different questions. Sometimes they don't ask questions, and I just kind of do whatever I feel intuitively called to do. So let's say we have that first question. I will ask that question directly. So, or maybe I might just ask for advice. Spirit, what is some advice for the collective at this time? Advice, messages, or guidance is how I'll phrase it. With tarot, it is very important to get the wording correct because words carry energy. Spirit, what is the advice? Okay. So if I am asking for advice, well, actually it's advice, messages, or guidance. Really, it's anything, whatever you want to say. So here, this is, to me, looking like a very good sign. It's saying that although you guys in the collective, although us in the collective, there are some struggles here. We are seeing clarity as we move forward. We are seeing opportunity open up. We're kind of getting out of the moon energy with this determination and enthusiasm. Now, as we continue to move forward, we should be seeing prosperity and a brighter future. So that's a very beautiful message, okay? I even place the cards down just wherever intuitively I feel called to place them. Everything is really just so go with the flow, with the way that I read the cards. Okay, so I make sure to answer all of the questions that the person has. And then at the end, I will usually just say, are there any other final messages? Spirit, do you have any other final messages for the collective? So we have one card, and it's the Page of Wands. So again, it does look like opportunities are opening up, passionate opportunities, a passionate pathway is opening up. It kind of, so this, you know, this was just a very, very, very brief example of what I do. And then at the end of personal readings, I do often get an oracle card, which is just, you know, the ones with the written messages on them. They usually come with a guidebook so that you can just leaf through it and then read the message to the person. And I really actually love using oracle cards because the messages are very, very much on point. Okay. So that's kind of the gist of what I do for my tarot card readings. Now, again, a totally separate topic is the way that I interpret the cards, and that is going to branch out into a lot of different separate videos, quite honestly. So a big part of it is going to be how to develop the methods for interpretation, how to see the different images. That's developing your third eye, again, your intuitive abilities. Developing your sense of how to read symbolism. And some other kind of out there ones, but are still very relevant, is developing verbal skills. I say that only because when you are interpreting, you really, really, really have to practice blurting stuff out. It really is that. And it helps to be able to form the right words, because again, words are sacred and words are very, very delicate, especially in something like tarot. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of separate sections for that, which I will be more than happy to get into. Okay, so for our next section, I am going to talk about some of the basic stuff, okay? So we're going back to the basics here. So why don't we start off with choosing a tarot deck for you. If you are a beginner, again, I mentioned this earlier, it is best to choose a tarot deck that is based off of the traditional Rider-Waite. The traditional Rider-Waite is this one here, but this is a mini version, which I actually kind of like. It's just like, see the size difference. All right. Yeah, so this is the traditional Rider-Waite, and the artwork is all pretty standard. It does not vary. It does not look, you know, completely different, such as this is an example of one that is not based off of the traditional Rider-Waite. This is called the Gilded Tarot. Super different images, although you can still kind of guess what they're talking about. It's similar in some of the cards, but it looks very different. The only reason why I recommend using or going with the traditional Rider-Waite at first is purely for the familiarity of it. Because if you're going to be learning all 78 meanings, which is, again, another video section, you have to be able to become familiar with the traditional images. It's just easier. I made that mistake when I learned on the Golden Tarot. The Golden Tarot looks nothing like the traditional. And so that's what actually made it a little bit harder for me to really, really grasp the images. But, you know, if you guys are just starting out, you can certainly do whatever you feel comfortable with. But again, just get used to these images. They will not vary. They will always be the same thing for the most part. So this here is the universal Rider-Waite. You can see the back has the black and those distinct stars on them. Now, again, this is the traditional with the plaid, kind of checkered plaid, blue and black and white. Okay, so that's over there. Now, we do have, this is called the Radiant. Similar backing to it, except that it's a dark blue and it has these yellow star slash dots. Yeah, no, they're stars. Okay. On the back of them, they are very similar in artwork, but the coloring and the, I guess the shading and some parts of it do look different. I mean, to me, this looks a little bit like they did it with almost like colored pencils or something like that. But it's still pretty much the traditional artwork that is familiar. Okay, so there's that. And this one over here, this is called the Albano-Waite, if I'm saying that right. Again, all of these are going to be just listed in the description. The backing is white and gold, and same thing, but this one does have slightly different coloring, and it's a little bit more dramatic coloring differences, you know, but for the most part, pretty much the same thing. Okay, so I would probably say that any of these will do for a beginner, right? Now, here's where my my personal preference comes in, okay? The reason why I like the universal is because it is very comfortable to use and to shuffle. I personally don't recommend the Radiant if you have trouble shuffling that style. You know, some people do not shuffle this style that I shuffle. You know, a lot of people just kind of do the shuffle like this, which is totally fine. Do whatever you feel comfortable with. But I do shuffle like the old-fashioned style where I'm flipping through them, right? Now that was easy to do on this deck. It is not easy to do on this deck because these cards are very stiff. All right, they're lovely cards, but they are stiff and my hands be hurting. Okay, so there's that. All right, so again, in terms of beginner decks, again, go with whatever you feel comfortable with and whatever artwork you are drawn to. Over time, you're gonna probably have a bunch of different tarot cards. I mean, I am a tarot card collector slash hoarder at this point. I have so many different ones. I don't even use most of them just for practical and comfort purposes. But go with whichever one you feel comfortable with. And some of the tips in terms of choosing a tarot card deck online or even in the store, you often won't be able to see the artwork on the box itself, and you can't open it in the store. So a lot of, some stores will have sample packs for you, or they'll just have some, you know, like where you can peek at the they might have it in a binder, they might have it in a ring where you can just like sample the cards. Not that many places do that. If you check on Google Images, it's kind of, it's not that helpful sometimes, although you might get lucky. However, one thing that you could do is you could look up YouTube videos, and a lot of tarot readers will actually have videos for unboxing the tarot cards, which I find very helpful. They will sit there with you guys, and they will unbox, they will open up a fresh deck, and they will show you what the artwork looks like, okay? That's something that I think is really cool. All right. And in terms of comfort and just my personal recommendations, the universal Rider-Waite, the traditional Rider-Waite, and the Albano-Waite. This one is actually pretty comfortable to shuffle as well. I'll just show you real quick. Yeah. So, and they're also good quality. That's obviously something that a lot of people would care about. Then later on, whenever you are ready to mix it up a little bit, I do personally also really love this deck. This is the Gilded Tarot again, and you know, it is very easy to use, and the artwork is quite beautiful. So that is something that will draw you to the cards. I'm trying to find the one that I really like, the picture. But yeah, so again, everything is all about choosing whatever your intuition and your inner spirit is calling you to choose. And that's really why we're here, to be natural and authentic. See, look how nice that is. Wow. All right. So now that you have chosen a tarot deck that is right for you, and again, in a separate video, I will speak on remembering the meanings. That one is going to be a doozy because there's 78 of them. But there are ways to do it, and there are ways to do it in a faster, more efficient, and just easier way, which I'll speak on. So let's put these back. Okay, now in the next part, I am going to be going back to shuffling briefly. All right, so here's what I do for shuffling. So again, so I'm going to go through it very slowly if I'm able to help out any super beginners. Okay, so I'm sure at this point there's videos on how to shuffle playing cards. This, I don't know if it would be the same exact thing, but here we go. So I'm going to just do it step by step. So I'm holding the deck in my hand, and I'm going to split it roughly in half by putting my thumb on the top and pulling it down, and then bringing it back up again, right? So you have these two sections. I might have to do that again. So I'm gonna hold it in my right hand, I'm right-handed, and then I'm gonna split it roughly in half, dip it down, and flip it back up again, right? The only reason to do that is because when you shuffle them at the middle, they're going to be both right side up. Okay, so let me just do that regular speed. Okay, so the way that you do this style of shuffling is how I do it anyway. So you have both halves, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bend the cards like this, and then I'm going to fan them out at the center towards each other so that they become intertwined, basically. Okay. And then you press it in the middle, you bend it again, and then let it flow. So let's do that again. Make sure that they're even. Okay, so you're going to split it like that. And then again, you're going to bend them and let them all mixed together. Bend it like this and let it go. So I'm sure that I'm sure that by now there's a lot of tutorials on just like, that's just how to shuffle regular playing cards. All right. So now getting into how I personally shuffle the tarot cards when I'm pulling the cards, which, well, I'm not, Spirit is. So again, I'm going to be holding it in my right hand, and all I'm doing is I'm going to take my left hand, and with my thumb, I'm going to be sliding the card down so that I catch it in my left hand. And I'm going to do this over and over again until inevitably a card jumps out. And you will find that sometimes the card like completely pops out and like flies across. Again, that is symbolic. Take the energy of that. It is telling you something about the reading. So like if a card flies out, it like completely runs away. It could be symbolic of the person running away from the energy or escaping. So again, I caught the card, and now I'm taking my left thumb and I am pulling the card down, catching it. And that's all I'm doing. That's literally it. I know it looks very complicated, but that's because I do it quite fast. It took me a lot of practice, but it became very comfortable after a while. Okay, so it looks like this when we're doing it faster. And I will do that for the entire deck, you know, as many times as I need to. All right. So one more time, I'm holding it in my right hand. With my left thumb, I'm just going to be thumbing it down like that. That's it. All right. So you let the cards pop out. There it is. Sometimes more than one will pop out, but I don't typically trust it if it's more than one, because maybe I made an error. So I try to do it just one at a time, however many I end up with. Okay, so there's the card. Again, I don't use reversed cards, or I don't interpret them reversed, and therefore my entire deck is always right side up for as much as I can keep it that way. All right, so that is shuffling. So I think what I'm going to talk about next is I will talk about some of the symbolism again, but more so how to intuitively interpret some of the cards, okay? So let's use, as an example, kind of hard to choose at this point, but I'll just take a couple of examples here. Some of the cards, which I'll speak on at a different section, are pretty obvious in their meaning, and therefore, you know, you don't really have to go into too much symbolism to really interpret them. All right. So let's take a look at maybe, okay, I'll just pull a couple. I pulled the Sun card, and let's do the Ace of Cups. Let's do the Wheel of Fortune, just a couple of examples. All right. So let's say that I pull the Ace of Cups. So the Ace of Cups, in its traditional meaning, can mean a beginning of new love. It can mean healing or reconciliation. You know, there's different things that you can interpret based on what the person's asking you. But again, it's all about what you see within the card when you're gazing at it. This is what is probably going to take the most practice and experience, is the ability to see things within the card, to see movement even within the card, or to see any image presenting itself to you within the card, right? Let's pause that for a moment. Let's take one step back and say what's a little bit easier to do. Now, let's say I have, let me actually use this one as an example. Here's the Wheel of Fortune. This is a card that has a lot to do with destiny, life, path, alignment, things like that, right? So let's say that I pull this for the person, and immediately I have to pay attention to what my eye is drawn to. Sometimes my eye is drawn immediately to the golden figures there, and I might interpret that as the person has a lot of spirit guides. This does not always happen. My eye might be drawn to something entirely different, such as the fact that they're holding little books. And I'm very attracted to that book. I'm very drawn to that book, and I'm like, I just feel compelled to say, hey, writing a book or something with holy scripts or knowledge might be part of your destiny. Okay? So again, just pay attention to what your eye is drawn to initially. There's a reason for it. Your eye might be drawn to a number, any symbol on the card, colors. Okay? So again, those are a little bit separate sections, but what is going to be helpful in interpreting your cards is this scope of knowledge. If you guys know about numerology, numbers have a significance, which I can link you to some resources for that. Gilded Tarot is actually quite excellent for that. So you might be drawn to a number, you might be drawn to any of the symbols, any of the details within the card. Pay attention to what that is and ask, why might that be? So here in this card, you might be drawn to the moon. You might be drawn to the fact that this person's card is walking uphill. Maybe you're drawn to, you might even start to see images come through. Like maybe instead of seeing the person walking up this way, maybe you see an image of sailing through the mountains or something like that, which I've gotten once before. It was kind of cool. Over here with the Ace of Cups, maybe the card starts to come to life a little bit. Maybe you see the flowing water of something else. At one point in my last pick a card reading, I mentioned tears. This here started to look like the flow of tears to me. But they were happy tears, by the way. They were cleansing tears. Another time I was drawn very much to the white bird. One time, just once, I was drawn to these teeny tiny little details here. These are bells, and I never noticed that before. It just depends on the energy of the person that I'm reading for and what message is meant for them. With the sun card, the obvious symbols are right there in your face. The sun, the child, the horse. Sometimes you might be drawn to this red color, you know, so red, another thing. So there's numbers, and then colors have symbolism as well. Red is a color of passion, personal power, confidence, different things depending. I mentioned the white color being representative of purity and innocence earlier in the video. You might be drawn to the brick wall. You know, maybe the brick wall stands for being very either rigid or structured or very impenetrable, just solid, okay, depending on the reading itself. So right now we're kind of just looking at the individual symbolism, but the practice and the experience, and this is the difficult part, is reading not just for one card, but a combination of cards. So I'm going to have to do a separate video on that one maybe in time, because that is actually quite hard to explain. Let's see if I can think of anything else for you guys for the symbolism of the cards. Sometimes you might be drawn to just the tiny little green leaves on the wands. That could be symbolizing the growth of something, the birth of something new, opportunity, right? This is a good one. The Three of Swords. Sometimes my mind's eye will see the swords removing from the heart and blood coming out. I know that sounds extremely graphic, but honestly, to me, I see that as like a thorn being removed from a person's heart, and therefore they are freed to bleed out and to then heal. Because the Three of Swords, as you can see, is a card that has to do with heartbreak, heartache, stormy skies that you can see there in the background. This one is another good example. All the knights are on horses, and the Knight of Pentacles is known for moving very slowly or even being kind of stuck. So when you have different knight cards, you might sort of begin to see the knight moving at a different pace. So for example, in this card, it's meant to be slow and steady pace, but maybe your mind's eye sees that the knight is actually moving a lot faster. So ask yourself, what does that mean for the person? So yes, we're looking at colors, numbers, symbols or details, movement in the cards, and if you're particularly skilled with clairaudience, you might hear sounds. That one's a cool one. That one's very cool. Because so, like for example, with this one, maybe you might actually hear the water pouring. Maybe you might actually hear the bells. You might hear any other divine sounds or signs. Use everything. Use all of this information. Use all of this detail for the purpose of interpreting, and ask what it means. Okay? And it might take a little while to develop that sense of psychic sight where you can where you can see different things happening in the cards. But it does kind of look like a mini movie or a little video sort of a thing where you can... but what I recommend is just to really practice and allow your imagination, your mind's eye, to go wherever it pleases, because it is meant to show you something. All right. Here in this card, maybe you might even hear the hammering sound, like who knows, right? There could be a bell in the background signifying maybe a church bell or a school bell or something like that. This card has to do with working very hard and other stuff. All right, so those are just some basic tips on the symbolism, on some interpretation. As an added bonus, if you're particularly skilled in other areas, like maybe you know about angels, maybe you know about mythology, that's something that could add to your interpretation and the scope of it. I don't really know anything about those topics, but that is something that could be helpful. For an example, I mean, on one of the cards, there are angels on these cards, so that could help you in some regard. Now, you're going to have... This is an interesting one that I often forget. You're going to have cards that have just human figures on them primarily. This is an example of one. Okay, the Emperor is a card of like authority and status and being no nonsense and stuff like that. Although, depending on the reading, you might not get that interpretation each time. I like to use the King of Wands. This is actually a very, very easy example of what I'm about to explain. The King of Wands, the traditional interpretation is that the King of Wands is confident, a leader, passionate. Now, depending on the energy that I feel, which is really the biggest thing. So in addition to the mind's eye, the best thing to develop is that gut feeling. What do you feel from the cards? Do you feel discomfort? Do you feel pain? Do you feel excitement? Do you feel just anything within the gut? Okay, very different center, very different psychic center than the mind's eye. The mind's eye is all about seeing the information, but if you feel it, this is like I think that the gut center is the most intuitive, the most natural, because you know how people say, oh, I had a gut feeling. You can certainly trust that gut feeling, and it's also where we can sense a person's aura and say, like, we have a gut feeling about a person. That's really what we're using first and foremost, is the gut. So anyway, pay attention to what you feel from the card and what you feel from the person's energy. So while this card can be something positive, if I'm reading for a particular topic or a person, it might not be positive. So I know in pick a card readings, I've said this before about the King of Wands, passion and leadership might turn into arrogance, narcissism, and hot-headedness, depending on that moment that I'm reading. So maybe you might start to see the king's hand like sort of clutching the staff. Maybe that is signifying something where he's this king is controlling. Okay, so this can really go in infinite directions. So practice. Again, allow your mind's eye to flex. Allow yourself to be completely free to feel the energies and to just really let your imagination just explore, basically. Okay. There are multiple meanings within most of the cards. So the Hanged Man is an example of that. I mean, it can mean something like surrender or sacrifice or letting go, or looking at things from a different perspective. So in a reading, you might mention a couple of different interpretations, yes, but go with whatever your gut is telling you is what the person needs to hear, right? All right, so again, we went over feeling the energies of everything, the pacing of the cards, and the numbers. Again, the 10s, I don't know a lot about numerology, too much, but the 10 does signify the ending of a cycle. That's a very common one that you will find in readings. The fives do signify conflict for the most part. All of the fives in the tarot deck are not cute. Okay, so let's then segue into that just a bit, where we can look at the different meanings. I can't really go over every single one. I mean, there's obviously a lot to go over, but let me at least go through some of them. Now, the tarot card meanings, that's the section we're in now. There are 78 cards total, and they are separated into major and minor arcana. Excuse the mess here. I'm just going to separate some of these. So I'm going to go over at least some of the major arcana cards now for the purpose of giving you some tips on how to remember the cards. And of course, there are many, many, many videos on this topic already. So I'm just going to provide a couple of additional tips that might help your journey of remembering them and just kind of wrapping your head around everything. So the major arcana, these represent very important life lessons. If you start to pull major arcana cards, and there's a lot of them, you can be assured that this reading is going to be very powerful. And that's what I often exclaim in my pick a card readings if I start to see that there's major arcana all over the place. Here are 4 examples of major arcana cards. They don't have a suit such as pentacles or swords. They just say the, or they don't have the. It's just a one word. Okay. It starts off, well, technically speaking, the Fool being a 0 is either the first card or the last card of the major arcana. So again, the major arcana represents important, very important spiritual life lessons or transitions, and they do have a bit more power and potency to them. Okay, so then we have the Fool. Then we have the Magician, card 1. After that, we have the High Priestess. Okay, I'm probably not going to go over every single one, just for purpose of time and efficiency here. So let's collect some of these here. And there is something, I'm pretty sure it's called the self-reference effect, where if you direct your learning towards things that you already know and are familiar with, you're going to remember them much better and much more easily. So that being said, try to relate the material to what you know, what you've experienced, or people that you know, so that it'll just be much easier to remember. Okay, so as an example, let's use the Empress as an example. So the Empress is card 3 in the major arcana. Look at the abundance, the beauty, and the confidence in this card. I have one of my best friends. I pulled the Empress for her in one of her readings that I did for one of the readings I did for her, and it's kind of like in my head that card is now her. She is this card is her. So it just makes it easier. So had I, I mean, that's not how I originally learned it, but if you guys are just starting out, try to think to yourself, who do I know in my life that's an Empress? Who do I know that has this confidence, this power, this beauty? There's other stuff involved like fertility, different things. So if you kind of just relate the material to something or someone that you already know, you'll remember it. Okay? So there's that. You can do the same thing with the Emperor. Same thing goes, right? Who do you know that is very much standing in their power, in their authority, who likes structure, who's a type A kind of a personality? And then you can remember it that way based off of the personality of the cards and the person that you know. So some of the other cards are a little bit more obvious. Justice. It's talking about justice, fairness, clarity, things like that. One fun tip that I like about this card, the Justice card, as well as the 6 of Pentacles, they both have scales on them. Depending on the reading, I will see the scales either tipping off or being balanced. So I might start to see the scales going crazy. This tells me there's an imbalance present within the relationship or the situation. Just like as an added tip there. All right, so so how to remember some of the cards. Again, some of the cards are a bit more obvious. The lovers, it's not only talking about lovers, it can talk about passion, it can talk about duality and balance. But yes, it can talk about physical attraction, love, chemistry, soulmate connections, things like that. Speaking of soulmates, this card over here, the Four of Wands, originally, when I learned about this card, I had no idea that it could signify a twin flame relationship. Now, I'm assuming that other card readers have used that interpretation because of the symbolism here, the image of the 1-1-1-1, 11-11. 11-11 or 11-22 are numbers commonly associated with soulmate or twin flame connections. So you guys can search on that if you're interested. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because this over time became known to me as a twin flame card, as a twin flame card. But that's not the original meaning, technically, right? You will find that over time, different cards will come to mean different things to you personally. And it is important to develop that, because then it's your own unique interpretation of the card. So you don't have to stick only to what the card means to you. Or to the books and to the original meanings of them. So for example, this is another one, the Six of Cups. Originally, this is supposed to be talking about maybe childhood memories, innocence, purity, different things like that. But then over time, I began to associate this with a soulmate connection because that's what I learned through other readers. And I thought that was, I agreed with it and I liked that interpretation, so I went with it. So I begin to see this card, and it signifies to me as a reader that there could be a soulmate connection or a past life connection. Okay, so again, that's very important to your brain will create these associations over time. That, oh hey, it's it's the twin flame card, it's the soulmate card, it's the card for letting go. So just again, that comes with practice. So major arcana cards, we only went sort of briefly through those. Another fun one is the Chariot. So my eye will be drawn to either the white or the black figure. I think that's a Sphinx. And depending on that, I just take that symbolism as the person is making a choice for their light or for their dark, for something that's better for them or something that's harmful for them. That's how I interpret that. Okay, so those are just some basic tips there. Another thing to keep in mind is that with the major arcana cards, there are some cards that do represent zodiacs. The Strength card is one example. This represents the sign of Leo. So that one's tricky because you will have many different zodiacs that are popping up all over the place. It's not only for major arcana cards, it is for minor arcana cards as well. So just kind of use those sparingly and only if you really, really feel called to use zodiacs in your readings, because for example, the Emperor could be talking about an Aries or maybe a fire sign, or not even a fire sign at all. So it just really depends on what you feel called to. So those are a couple of tips about the major arcana cards. And as far as the minor arcana cards, I'm just going to give you a couple of examples because again, there's a lot of videos out there already talking about the meanings. So let me just pull some, and then after that I will talk about a couple of themes, because themes are actually very helpful for learning these. So let's get a Pentacles. Well, actually, you know what? Here's a King of Pentacles. Let's get the Five of Pentacles. Remember I mentioned earlier that the fives do signify some kind of pain or conflict or imbalance or something like that. That's another thing that is going to make it easier. It's not exactly a theme, but it is a number. So you see these are both fives, and fives are typically something that is troublesome, with the exception of the Hierophant, which is a 5. He's okay. So here's another 5, the 5 of Wands. You can see that these are all difficult energies. Another easy way to remember them, because they all represent something potentially negative or, seemingly negative. Okay. So the major arcana cards are, well, let's get into the minor arcana cards. So you do have the 4 suits. You have pentacles, you have swords, you have wands, and the cups suit. Okay, I just pulled out the kings just because I wanted to represent the highest card in each one. All right, so here are the 4 minor arcana suits. And again, I'm not going to go into the fullest detail, but let's just run through a couple of them. The wands suit as a whole represents things like passion, or sometimes creativity, sometimes spirituality, but yes, life force, passion. This is representing the element of fire. And it's actually easy on this card because he's wearing an orange cloak, or whatever this is he's wearing, and it does look like a very fiery kind of a person. And your brain, again, will begin to associate the wands suit with fire, passion, and all of it, excitement, things like that. Right? So that's just one of the cards. So if you have another example, a good way to remember things are the aces, right? So if you have the ace of any of the suit, this is basically signifying a new beginning. An ace is the beginning of something, right? It's the first card, and it is representing some kind of new beginning in terms of the suit that it's holding. So here it's the wand, so maybe this is a beginning of something passionate. Okay. Then you have the swords. This is representing the element of air, and this has to do with the mind, clarity, truth. Sometimes I even add in direction. Whereas the cups, instead of talking about the elements of air and the things like logic and thought and clear logic and things like that, the suit of cups is talking about feeling, emotion, intuition, representing the element of water. And I mean, the imagery is there, so you can use that to guide you. And then finally, we have the suit of pentacles, which is a lot more down to earth. This is talking about, this is the element earth. And so this is talking about more practical things. So it could be talking about finances or job or daily 3D world stuff. In the past, I always identified with the suit of wands just because the Queen of Wands was a card that I drew back then. And I came to identify with the Queen of Wands in some aspects because she is passionate, she is creative, she, just has a zest for life kind of a thing. So whichever card out there that reminds you of you, again, another easy way to remember it. So let's talk briefly about a couple of the themes, and this might be helpful in terms of your interpreting as well as in your remembering of things. So let's do, like, the 2 opposite ends of the spectrum, I think, are actually going to be the easiest to remember and to work with. So these are the cards. Let's just pull these out first because they're right here in front of me. I think there was just one. Yeah, here it is. Okay. So let's use a simple example of a theme of how to remember cards, or to sort of organize them within your mind, rather than trying to kill yourself remembering 78 different cards. That's a lot. So let's take a simple theme of like cards that have to do with pain, emotional pain. And this might even be talking about like mental health or whatnot, or just matters of heartache, things like that. So these cards here are all quite sad and difficult energies. Okay, so let's look at it one by one. 9 of Swords, very obvious. There's distress, there's anxiety, there's pain. Color black to help to represent the darkness. Over here, this is, again, obvious. You can see the pain and the gray. The obvious symbolism of the heart being, impaled by not 1 sword, but 3. Again, more black. You can see the hardship here in the background, or, well, rather in the foreground. And here, more pain. I mean, swords are kind of tough. Here, again, black, and you can see the symbolism here of the cups that fell. And here, ouch, right? More pain, more black, more swords. So if you want, you can separate the cards based off of this theme of pain and sadness, or like difficult emotions. You can add in as many as you want, because the devil can also represent that, pain, black, darkness, things like that. The Tower I wouldn't add, just because this is for the purpose of the greater good. But there are going to be cards like these, like I showed you, that really are about just pain. This one is not as intense, but it certainly is burdensome type of a pain. So again, however your mind interprets that theme or that category will help you to begin to pair them into that group and then remember them. So that's one end of the spectrum. Now the total opposite of that is the cards that have to do with happiness and brightness and love and high vibrations. Okay, so let's take a couple of those. And yes, they do connect to the actual card meanings, right? I mean, give or take. So let me just pull out a couple of examples. So again, you're going to see the similar themes in the color schemes. Not always, though, because this card is not happy, but it does have yellow. But it does look a little bit like a false yellow, quite honestly. So here we have a couple of examples. Let's see. So we went the total opposite of the negative cards. Let's just call these positive cards, even though, you know, it really just does depend on the reading. All right, so let's look at them. So here's the 10 of Cups, a lot of happiness and brightness. There's literally a rainbow. There's a happy family here. And blue skies is another example. So here, a lot of happiness, friendship, high vibration, joy. This one, I think that this is the happiest card in the entire deck. It literally means joy, happiness, brightness. Again, high vibration, excitement. Similar here. The sun is there. Anytime you see the sun, you can probably bet that it is a happy card for the most part, or the golden skies, like I said. This is a card of wish fulfillment, satisfaction, and you can kind of see based off the expression as well of the cards what it could signify. This one, you could add in that. Another obvious theme would be cards for love, right? So you would probably remove, or not remove, but it's just like one more thing to add into the mix. So these two can represent love. I showed you before this one. You can say it represents love or even family. Okay, so we have negative cards, positive cards, love cards. There's certain cards that could represent something for healing. Certain cards that, oh, here's another love card. All right. And this one is a mini theme and a mini category, but I find them very helpful. I often get love readings and talking about the future. I call these two cards the cards of moving on. And if I see this in a love reading and the person is asking me the outcome or, what have you, this can represent either them or the other person moving on from the relationship, okay? The Six of Swords and the Eight of Cups. That is what they are talking about in the meanings, moving on from painful times, moving up and onward onto the next chapter. Similarly, another thing that could come up, and I mean, it again, it just depends on your interpretation, your gut instinct, but very often other cards that could represent something in a relationship, these cards, this is another thing I learned from other tarot readers that I did agree with over time. These two cards can represent potentially a third-party thing, a third-party situation. Not always, so use these responsibly, because this originally is supposed to be talking about work and collaboration, and this is talking about friendship. But sometimes you might see them pop up more than once in a reading, and they're confirming. It could talk about a third-party interference, maybe. All right, potentially. Use responsibly, please, because you don't want to tell somebody, whoo, trouble. Okay, so those are just a couple of themes. Another theme could be a theme of balance, I did mention already. So here you have Justice, the Two of Pentacles, and Temperance. All of these talk about balance or maybe a lack of balance, all right? So I know that there is plenty more that I could go into. Like I said, it took me a while to get this video out. I know it's not the most organized video, and if I sat here and tried to organize everything, it would take me like 6 months to get out to you guys. So this is truly for returning subscribers. You guys already know me, you know my style. If you're a new viewer, you know, obviously check out my pick a card readings. You will see my tarot process there, how I do things. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to comment on this video, and I will do my best. I can certainly do separate videos for some of the topics, you know, depending on what it is and if I have enough content for it. But that's the gist of it. That's the gist of my tarot process. I really hope that this helped you guys. If I think of anything else, yes, I might do a separate video on it, but for the most part, that's what I have for you. You can feel free, of course, you know, after you get more comfortable with things, you use tarot cards, you can use oracle cards, you can have index cards and write your own messages. These are channeled messages. You can use different things like crystals. You can use the beautiful charms. Remember, I used that in my last reading. You can use charms, anything at all that you feel is helpful to just add a little bit more detail and depth to your readings. Okay, so we'll see how we go with other informational videos. Again, I hope this helped. Let me know your feedback. Let me know your questions. I did my best to just get this out to you in the most natural and, you know, most efficient way that I could. So thank you guys for watching, and let me know about your tarot experiences and anything else that you'd like to check in with me about. Okay, so sending you guys blessings as usual. I will see you in the next pick a card, and let me know what's going on with you. I'll see you next time. Thank you guys. Bye bye.